mighty phantoms of the evening sky. To whom do these celestial steeds belong, when you appear to us like gods on high? What brings you here to mystify?
Hi, thanks for tuning in to the UFO show. I am Kate Valentine, and we are live on 1160 WVNJ. Today's show is going to be a little bit different. Today, you are going to be the guest. You've been listening for almost 2 years now, and I would like to know what you think. Are we really here all alone? First, I'd like to thank all the ufologists who have done all the work of investigating, writing, CD making, speaking at numerous conferences. The purpose of the show was to simply bring all of their hard work to the attention of those who had not yet been exposed to this field. So during the show, I'd love to hear from you. You have been exposed to all these theories and all these thoughts. I'd like to know what your conclusions have been, and you can post them at any time at AtlanticCoastUFOs.com. So here we go in no particular order. Our first two guests were New Jersey's own Pat Mercatilio and George Filer. Pat holds the all-time record of conferences held. There are now 50 of them and still counting, as well as all the brand new investigators that have been introduced to the field. Hats off to his amazing feat. I doubt if there has been anyone that's ever given 50 conferences in any field, let alone UFOs. And I don't think there is one ufologist worth their salt that has not made the pilgrimage down to Bordentown on Pat's conference. The second New Jerseyite, George Filer, has come out for years, week after week after week, with Filer's Files, with news and views, and not just about UFOs. He also covers political issues, bringing home the point that somewhere along the line, UFOs have a real political impact, even if it is only to show that the government does have the ability to keep information from the public and that it controls this information once it is released. One of the more interesting reports he had ever covered, and I remember this from a while ago, was the possibility of a crashed disk in the Baltic Sea that bore a striking resemblance to the Millennium Falcon of Star Wars fame. If you haven't seen this yet, it is on YouTube and Facebook and certainly on Filer's Files, and I would encourage you to take a look at it. It's a very interesting little artifact. The same time that came out, they also had news reports that there was a shipwreck, containing platinum that in today's market would be worth well over several $1 billion. So my question to you at that time was, if you had the choice, if you could recover the shipwreck, worth a large fortune, or a crashed UFO with occupants proving that there was life elsewhere, which one would you choose? And at the point I said, no copping out. You can't say, well, I'd pull up the shipwreck, get the money, and then go pull up the craft. I'd really like to know your choice. Which would you go after? The shipwreck worth billions of dollars, or that craft with the occupants? Let me know your answer. You can post it now on AtlanticCoastUFOs.com. So along with some other shows we had, I still really have no idea what to make of crop circles. Like the UFOs, they exist, and like the UFOs, there doesn't seem to be any explanation for them. Our recent guest, Patty Greer, was very interesting. She's done a lot of research into this, and she's pretty sure that they are communication attempts and not hoaxes. Again, if you haven't seen that show, Patty Greer, Greer, is a very interesting person, has a lot to say about crop circles. What strikes me most, though, about all the various guests we have had on is the huge range of approaches they have had to try and understand this enigma of UFOs. Everybody seems to be coming at it from a different angle, and just an analogy I've used time and again is the four blind men with the elephant. We've had so many different types of people on. We've had contactees and abductees, and these people have been aptly described by Dr. David Jacobs as frontline scouts. They go out and they bring us back information on these craft and their occupants. The Barney Hill case. This was covered by Kathleen Marden in her book, Capture. Kathleen is the Betty Hill. Now, if she or her family were making up this story, they would definitely have me fooled. I mean, these are very sincere, down-to-earth people. I have personally met Kathleen and her co-author, Stanton Freeman, and I simply cannot imagine either one of them wasting their time on some made-up story. And speaking of Stanton Freeman, and if you followed you not, is an investigator par excellence. I could take a few tips from him. Now, after all those years of his researching and investigating and speaking to almost everyone in the field at various conferences, he has come to a conclusion that he is proud to state. Simply put, he feels flying saucers are real. So that's interesting. And we have also had some brilliant investigative reporters as well. Among them, Leslie Kean and Jamie Foxx. Jamie has just recently come along with his new sort of TV show, Chasing UFOs. And Leslie Kean, in her rather famous book, has direct quotes straight from the mouth of pilots, generals, and government officials. And Jamie Foxx had made a video, I Know What I Saw. This sums up most people's response to these craft. They know what they saw. The case in point here was the Phoenix Lights. This was a mile-wide craft floating through Class Bravo airspace over Phoenix, Arizona, very slowly, very silently, and visible to thousands of people. The Air Force explained that as flares. Again, as Mr. Fox states in his video, they knew what they saw, and it was not flares. Frances Barnwood was on the city council. She felt that this craft, whatever it was an immediate danger to the commercial aircraft flying through Class Bravo, as well as possibly the city, and she wanted to have it investigated. For her efforts, she was thrown off, more or less, the city council. So that seems to be the popular response. You know, they're out there, they're interesting, but if you get too close to them, there'll be consequences. I don't think anyone out there really feels that it was flares. Dr. Lynn Key Tai was very interested in this and risked her medical career going publicly forth with her photographs of these lights, photographs that would make it quite clear that they were not flares. So that was just one case of government denial. Another classical example, aside from the swamp gas theory, which was the all-time great one, but another example was the Rendlesham Forest case. In this case, we had on a U.S. military base with nuclear weapons during the Cold War, guarded by various military personnel. Now, there were reports of lights in the forest, and they thought at first there was a potential crash, that some plane or whatever had gone down in the forest, and these men were sent out to investigate. And again, these were men that were tasked with the force of keeping this base safe. So obviously they were relatively handpicked and well-trained. And when they got out there, what they found was a landed communicating craft of some sort. Jim Peniston actually went up and touched it. And yet this was written off as a mistake on their part from a lighthouse light that was swinging through the forest that this craft had landed in. And so again, a government denial case. Obviously something had landed. These guys had gone over, touched it. Peniston later on said that he is now having strange sort of thoughts of a binary code. And he's a little bit confused as to where that would be coming from, or if it even is coming from it, and if it may just be his imagination. But still, there's a lot going on here in Rendlesham that is not being disclosed. I think Nick Pope has come out recently about it, and there's great books on it. Peter Robbins has written, along with Larry Warren, Left at Eastgate. Read, and in it not only is there a craft discovered, but there's also some possibility that some of the military men that were involved with it may have been brainwashed, or at least exposed to some sort of a mind-altering procedure right on the Air Force Base itself. So there's some nasty stuff involved with this as well. Anyway, and that brings us now to disclosure And but we'll get to that right after a break. This is Kate Valentine. We are on 1160 WVNJ, and today's show is going to be a little different, and that you are the guest. And I thought this might be a good time to do a review of just some of our past shows, some of the highlights, go over some UFO theories, personalities, and rumors, and to get you involved. Really, what are your theories? What are your thoughts about all this? Post them now. Atlantic Coast, UFOs.com. I'll be right back. Hi, welcome back to the Kate Valentine Show on 1160 WVNJ. Today, you are the guest. As Dave says, we are putting the U in UFOs. You've heard a lot of different views on UFOs on this show over the years and months. Now I'm really curious to hear what your views are, what your thoughts. Have you come to any conclusions about this? Any thoughts as to what the government should or shouldn't be doing? Please post it now on our website, AtlanticCoastUFOs.com. Speaking of the government, just before the break, we were talking about disclosure, and that brings us, of course, to Stephen Bassett. He's been beating the drum forever with conferences, websites, interviews, and very little support. But he continues on, and we should support him. Go to his website, Steve Bassett. We have a caller now, Tris from New Jersey, about recent UFO activities. Tris, welcome to the show. Thanks for calling.
Hi, Kate. How are you? Can you hear me pretty good? It's good to be back on your show again.
Yeah, I can hear you fine. Welcome back.
Well, it's great to be back. I just had a couple of things I wanted to talk about. I had about two or three things, actually. It's amazing you were talking about the past history and basically the way I feel as though, obviously, that the U.S. government is not ready yet for disclosure, full disclosure, and it's just amazing to me with a lot of the other governments seem to have made some great changes in this, as far as Mexico and even Brazil and some of the other South, maybe Ecuador as well. They seem like they're taking a step in the right direction. A couple of years back, the Mexican Air Force released the videos of the fighter pilots, and something that unfortunately hasn't occurred here yet. And I can only talk about the history of ufology and some of these great men that have come before, and some of these guys, in my opinion, have actually given their lives for it. You don't have to look any further than the mid-'90s and the early 2000s. Phil Schneider, he talked about the DUMBs, the deep underground military bases, and of course, William Cooper, with his great book, Behold the Pale Horse. He touched on the many different things, including the New World Order and the Illuminati. And a lot of people can try to debunk, a lot of these critics can try to debunk a lot of what Phil Schneider said about the DUMBs, and actually he said he had a shootout with the gray aliens. But here's the bottom line. The bottom line is that these two gentlemen died suspiciously, and I think that right there pretty much really represents the truth. Both suspicious deaths. Phil Cooper was shot in front of his house with his back turned by we know the history there, by the policeman, and William Schneider died suspiciously through suicide. And it's amazing that when they ransacked that, when the police investigated the house to take a look at the house to see what was left behind, there was most of the artifacts that he would take with him to his interviews, to his lectures, was missing. No money or anything like that. So I think that these suspicious deaths pretty much to me represents the truth, that these guys had a lot, maybe not everything that they were saying was true, but certainly through all their testimonies, there had to be a lot of truth in what they were saying. And certainly many others allegedly have given their lives as well for stepping out. And it's just amazing to me that in 2012, there is no disclosure yet by the U.S. government. And it's really sad because we, the people, the citizens of this great country, are really being the ones that are being shamed and deprived. Ms. Valentine, I opened up Google today and I did a quick search of UFOs as I do every day. And I took a look at it's just amazing to me that every day it's something new. For example, from ABC News, 36% of the population now, for the National Geographic Survey, believe in UFOs. We've got the McKinnon case in London. He's being tried. Allegedly, he tapped into the computers for trying to uncover some UFO documents, and he's being tried and trying to get him over to England. And it's just amazing that just recently in Oregon, evening news. I mean, many people are witnessing these sightings, and it's all over the news. And it just why can't they just stop the secrecy? Again, I'm looking at Google, and we got the new National Geographic program, Chasing UFOs. I mean, some of these things are just too. In other words, this is a real phenomenon. In fact, it's not a phenomenon. It's very real.
Oh, I agree with you. And, you know, you have to think, well, what is it that they're hiding? And anything that's hidden, you know, you get very suspicious of it, too. And I think that gives UFOs a bad name. Like, oh, well, if they're not releasing what it is, it's got to be something really bad.
Well, you know, I mean, we've all heard of Stephen Greer. Anybody that listens to your show through his Great Disclosure Project, where he's put many retired government officials on the record. They've come out of, you could say, out of the closet. Retired officials, they come on the record and with their numbers, and they've stated that, listen, there's something to this. And Stephen Greer will tell you that it's just greed and fear.
Yep.
Greed and fear. And I just wanted to talk to you about a couple other things, too, that was pretty much amazing to me, if that's okay. Really what I called you for.
Sure.
This Baltic Sea phenomenon that started roughly about over a year ago, that strange anomaly on June 19th of 2011 that was found during the sonar survey of the seafloor. I think it was in Sweden, or they allegedly found a giant circle on sonar on the bottom of the Baltic Sea when searching for the shipwrecks with bottles of champagne. In other words, on the early morning of June 19th, 3 of the 9 crew members of the exploration team saw something strange appear on their screen. So in other words, initially they thought they had found a 90-meter depth of a large-shaped craft that looked like with a diameter of 60 feet. Peter Lindbergh, the initiator of the expedition, in this field you were confronted with many strange, this is his testimony, with many strange things. But all those 18 years that I've done this, he'd been doing this, he had never seen anything like it, and it's completely round in shape. So then we finally, in other words, at the beginning of the expedition, they didn't have enough money, so they were trying to raise some money to go back down there and get a look at really what it was. Then in this year, June of this year, I believe, late June or middle June, I'm not sure the exact date, but the diving expedition team arrived to go down and examine the objects. And according to the Swedish news site, Aftonbladet, the team was already worried. This is initially, even before they got down there, that someone may have beaten them to the object. Team member Dennis Asberg reportedly stated recently, and this is fact, that Russian and Americans were conducting, how convenient, military exercises in the area. So anyway, make a long story short, when they finally returned to the surface, I guess it was about a week later or 3 or 4 days later with what they had seen down there, they said that it was more likely a rock formation that occurred where fluid or gas vented, says Charles Paul of California's Monterey Bay Aquarium. So initially they thought it was an object, 60 feet in diameter, 90 meters depth, a large-shaped object. Now, after the diving expedition that was allegedly influenced by the Russians and the Americans' military exercises, it's some rocks. Now it gets stranger, though. From June 27th, the object is raised about, now this is the most recent testimony. We go from it being to an object to being rocks. And now June 27th, a week later,
just quickly interrupting you for a second, we're going to put it up on the website, and I'd like to have our listeners take a look at this and see what they think. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but they were lifting it.
Sorry, Kate.
Oh, no,
I wasn't sure if I was going on too much.
No, go ahead. This is a great story. I love this story. But go ahead.
Yeah, me too, Kate. It's really, thank you for letting me talk about this. Your great show.
Oh, thanks. But this is classic. This is a classic example of something really odd that gets covered up right away. Go ahead.
And here is the callback, basically. In other words, it's just, it's not the first time that this has happened, but now June 27th, the testimony from the diving team is now that the object is raised about 10 to 13 feet above the seabed. A hole is surrounded by a strange rock that the expedition team can't explain. Stones are covered in something resembling soot, which baffles experts and the divers. And they also are saying now that phones and some cameras turn off when close to the object. So, I mean, in other words, this is the epitome of the whole situation that we've been going through for the past 60 years. Maybe, in other words, in some of the testimonies, well, at least we know about the last 60 years. We get this information. It's out there, and certainly it seems like someone is silenced or it's debunked. We go from a ship, 90 feet in diameter. We go from a ship to some rocks, and now the phones are shutting off. And so, which is it? That's my question. And why the secrecy? It's just, we're not dumb as a people. We're only dumb when we don't stick together, the American people. And clearly, we're definitely not sticking together because at this point in 2012, did you know, Kate, that MUFON recently, this past year, has been the greatest number of sightings in the history of MUFON. Kate, did you know that over 500 sightings, 500 sightings are reported every single month. Mm-hmm. Now, some of these may be falsities. Some of these could be our own government's their black book technology things that they're working on, but certainly not all of them. And basically, without them disclosing the facts to us, our government, they're basically saying that we really are stupid. And going back to William Cooper, he called us sheeple. And he said that this was 15 years ago or 12 years ago, somewhere around that time. He said that if we don't open our eyes as a people, they will have won. And I'll tell you what, the way it looks, they're certainly winning. The media reports these things every day. I told you we Google these things every single day here. And it's just news story after news story after news story. When do they finally go on the record?
Because you have nobody in real authoritative position to announce it. I mean, look, Steve Bassett was the press club in Washington, D.C., with, as Leslie Kean said, pilots, generals, government officials. And John Alexander gets up and says that this disclosure's already here. The craft are all over the place, like you said, 500 sightings a month. And they're contacting us. It's just that there's no public acknowledgement. I guess we have to hear it from ABC, CBS, NBC News.
Otherwise, Kate, it's amazing that you say that, because really, listen, in the past couple of years, we all have seen, not everybody that's involved, that really has an interest in this, which everybody really should. Football games, there's flashes of light across the screen that they can't explain. Mm-hmm. News stories, there's flashes of light, there's UFOs that are captured in the screen. They want to be seen, but unfortunately, you talk about some of these important people that have stepped forward, and you don't think it gets any more important than Nick Pope. Right. The former, the Ministry of Defense for London. He's out again now. Published a daily article June 7th in the Daily Mail. UFO expert Nick Pope and former investigator for the UK Ministry, of Defense and the UFO project. Mm-hmm. He warned that the 2012 Olympic Games to be held in London could be tempting target for UFOs and their alien occupants. Pope is a frequent guest, as we know, on Coast to Coast AM, where he shares his research into UFO abductions, crop circles, and there's something interesting right there that we touched on, the crop circles and the cattle mutilations, and other extraterrestrial phenomena. He says this is quote unquote, with the summer of mass events, we are on high alert for terrorism, but we also must cast our eyes further afield and be prepared for even the most seemingly unfathomable. It has been widely held belief in military defense circles that aliens have been able to detect us for decades via TV, satellite, and radio broadcasts. What once seemed like science fiction is steadily being realized by central governing bodies as distinctly real. If the aliens have studied our psychology, they may choose to appear in our skies on a significant date. The closing ceremony of the Olympic Games is one date being widely circulating by conspiracy groups. Then he states that the atomic bombs that detonated in the 1940s and the rocket technology since developed would unconsequentially have alerted nearby alien civilizations to our existence. On their arrival, it is difficult to say what they would do, explore, help, or destroy our resources, make us quite a special threat. But you talk about people in the loop and you talk about people in testimony. That's one gentleman right there that is pretty much on the record. And I'll tell you what, Kate, I hate to say it, but I really would be very happy if there was some sort of showing at the Olympic Games. I'm not God, I'm not a predictor of this, but I think the time has finally come, and I think that it would be a perfect time for these things to reveal themselves. And nobody would be able to debunk it at that point. I think the time is now. Well,
we're going to take a quick commercial break. I thank you for that call. It's great, Tris, and I'm looking forward to the Olympic Games with a little gray bearing the Olympic torch and on into the stadium. That would be phenomenal.
It's a pleasure to be on your show. You're the best. Thank you for everything. Thanks for putting it out there for the people and getting the word out. You are the best. God bless you.
Well, thank you, Tris. That's nice to hear. And let's hear what you have to say out there. Come on, post your thoughts right now. Atlantic Coast, UFOs.com. Do you think that was a Millennium Falcon that was in the Baltic Sea, or maybe just a pile of rocks? Give us a call. Atlantic Coast, UFOs.com. Be right back. Hi, welcome back to the Kate Valentine UFO Show on 1160 WVNJ. Today, you are the guest. Dave says we are putting the U in UFOs. So you heard a lot of different views on UFOs on this show, and you just heard a really interesting exposition on a lot of them. Now I'm really curious to hear what your views are. You can post them on Atlantic Coast, UFOs.com. You can also give us a call, 962-1160. As Driss said, that there were a lot of very, very, very well-known people making comments on UFOs, and I had gotten some of the quotes for the show. For example, 1955, talking about the military getting involved, Douglas MacArthur said the next war will be an interplanetary war. This is 1955, after the 52 flyover of Washington, D.C., and after Eisenhower supposedly made a treaty with the aliens, the Grenada Treaty in 55. The nations of Earth must make a common front against attack by people from other planets. He reiterated this in 1962 at a graduation address at West Point. We deal now not with things of this world alone. We deal now with the ultimate conflict between a united human race and the sinister forces of some other planetary galaxy. So those are some interesting thoughts. And Earl, let's see, he wrote in, Kate, the 1986 Japanese airline 1628 incident where a cargo 747 flying toward Alaska encountered a number of UFOs. Most were small, but one was massive, twice as large as an American aircraft carrier. The prolonged sighting was confirmed by the FAA and military radar. So again, you have a sighting and you have confirmation by military radar. And it was also further reported, whoops, Earl, you just fell off the screen, but I remember that sighting. That was terrific. And it was so investigated, and it was so beyond question that it's ridiculous to think that nothing had happened there. My eyeballs are jumping up and down a little bit in the screen here. But anyway, some other quotes from other presidents. Carter, I'll make every piece of evidence of information this country has about UFO sightings available to the public and scientists. I'm convinced that UFOs exist because I have seen one. I really like this one. This was from Reagan, and he was speaking to Spielberg in a screening in the White House of E.T. Reagan turns to Spielberg and says, you know, there aren't 6 people in this room who know just how true that really is. I mean, wow, that's from the horse's mouth. So to go on with Earl's comment, I'm sorry, it went off the screen just before, he refers us to John Callahan's chapter in Leslie Kane's book. This was really important because Callahan said these should be investigated just because they're a danger to our commercial aircraft. He goes on to say many sightings by one or a few people at best, these are anecdotal and of little value unless many people report the same sighting. However, when radar data supports competent witness testimony about structured craft, all reasonable argument against the phenomenon falls by the wayside. Incidents such as this promulgate the secrecy in government theory. Whether or not the secrecy is based on legitimate national security reasons, the invisible hand of a shadow government, or simply because they don't know the nature of the phenomena, the secrecy exists, it must stop. Thank you, Earl. I agree with you. At this point in time, I think that any advances in this area will be made outside of the USA, as it appears that our government is at the vanguard of the UAP secrecy effort. Earl uses the term UAP, which is starting to replace UFO and has less of a doo-doo-doo-doo, giggle effect on the general populace. Dale also wrote in to say that he thinks 2 of the best cases and the most reliable are the one back in Texas, the Cash Lendrum incident. That, I'll tell you, it's really way too much of an incident to go on here, but if you haven't, you should really look it up. It's Cash, C-A-S-H, Landrum, L-A-N-D-R-U-M, and it was back in 1980 in Texas. And also there was the Tim Edwards incident in Salida, Colorado in 1995, which he videotaped. That you should see as well. Also, Dave wrote in says that it seems like there's a new UFO sighting reported on the internet almost daily. Has there been an increase in UFO activity in recent years, or has our technology today just allowed us to better document the activity? It's both, I think, Dave. First of all, there is a much, I think it's just a freer climate to report these things. I don't think you're made out to be quite the nut job that you used to be. the infamous aluminum foil hat wearing people. And of course, the reports are a little bit more accurate because of the iPhones and all the other video devices that have come out recently. And also, it's a little bit harder to discount a sighting when you actually have a picture of something that's been sighted. So yeah, I think there has been an increase, definitely. And you see it in not only MUFON, but also in New Fork and many of the other reporting things. Our last caller, Tris, brought up a dark side of UFOs, and that was that there have been a lot of unexplained or sort of hokey deaths related with them. Two of the more famous celebrity ones that have always intrigued me was Dorothy Kilgallen, and I know a lot of the audience will not be familiar with that name, but she's a very, very famous woman journalist. She was syndicated back in the 50s and just extremely well known. I mean, more so than Katie Couric today would be. And she was stationed in London for a while, and her source over there, some person she became well known to, was a cabinet-ranked British official. And supposedly he had disclosed the whole story behind UFOs, and she was going to come back to the States and break that story as probably the scoop of the century, as I'm sure you can imagine. Unfortunately, before she could do that, there was a suicide, which was definitely unexplained and definitely unexpected. She was a very happy, very successful person, and they said that the suicide was due to an overdose of sleeping pills and alcohol, none of which she was ever known to have used. So that was a little bit odd. The other celebrity death that was sort of unexplained was Marilyn Monroe. And that, too, was supposedly a suicide, also alcohol, sleeping pills type thing. And most of it was explained because of her involvement with the Kennedys and the national scandal that would have ensued. However, a lot of the UFO advocates believe that Kennedy told her that, oh yeah, I know all about UFOs and this is what it is, and that was what she was going to disclose to the public the night before she met her on sort of unseemly end. So those were just two celebrities. Another one that's very familiar to ufologists is John Mack. He was the Harvard psychiatrist that was over in London, wasn't paying attention, and was hit and killed by a car just as he was on the basis of some disclosure. So there's a lot of these things that, may or may not. I mean, these could all have been accidental. There was just a rash of very unusual cancers, but J. Allen Hynek, Jim and Coral Lorenzen, Ivan Sanderson. But again, we are all mortal, and these could have been explained by that. But it does get to be a little bit suspicious after a while. And hang on, I'm just trying to get up here. I can't quite read this comment. Okay, we'll get to that later, but let me just give you one more quote here, which I found was very interesting too, was that Gordon Cooper, who was one of the astronauts, came on to the UN in his address and said, "For many years I have lived with the secret. It is a secret that is imposed on all specialists and astronauts. Every day," this is back in '85, "every day our radar instruments capture objects of form and composition unknown to us. And there are thousands of witness reports and a quantity of documents to prove this. But nobody wants to make them public." And during this is Gordon Cooper's spaceflight, NASA officials picked up an unintelligible foreign language. This is really an odd thing. And then Cooper was questioned about it later, and he simply said, "As far as I'm concerned, there have been too many unexplained examples of UFO sightings around Earth for us to rule out the possibilities that some form of life exists out there beyond our own world." And Diane says, "Does your guest have a website or blog?" Yes, I do. It's Kate Valentine at UFO Kate. Timothy Dean writes in to say, "Hey, what's wrong with aluminum foil hats? They're stylish and go with everything." That's true, and they keep those evil rays out of your head too, Timothy. I don't know. Sometimes I don't know if you saw the film Signs. It certainly protected the brother and the two children from the aliens in that movie. It was a pretty funny scene with the three of them sitting there with aluminum foil hats on. But sort of to get back to disclosure a little bit too, I think I'm not as hopeless as Earl is for our government to release this information, because I think we're starting to see small amounts of information here and there. First of all, they released the actual fact that exoplanets exist. Wow. And then, this really gets more interesting, Kepler picks up life-enabling exoplanets. And then all of a sudden, SETI comes back in vogue, and they describe what an ET signal would look like, I guess, other than the WOW signal they picked up. Then they discover even more galaxies. So again, my question to you through all of this, and I'd like to have you post your answer on Atlantic Coast USOs, are we really out here all alone? What do you think? We're going to take a quick break, and I really wish that you would post your answer to that right after that. Kate Valentine here on the UFO Show, 1160 WVNJ. We'll be right back, and I'd like to hear your answer at AtlanticCoastUFOs.com. Bye. Welcome back to the Kate Valentine UFO Show on 1160 WVNJ. Today, you are the guest, putting, as Dave says, you in the UFOs. You have heard a lot of different views on UFOs on this show. Now, I'm really curious to hear what your views are, if you have any theories at all. And you can post them right now on AtlanticCoastUFOs.com. There's so many things to talk about. I was really going to go back to one of my favorite things, which is 1952, with the flyovers of Washington, D.C. It seems like the first time they went over, the government didn't take them very seriously, so a week later they came back and flew over Washington, D.C. again. Now here's another question for you. If they had landed and some alien pilot had gotten out on the White House lawn, what do you think they'd look like, or what would you have wanted them to look like? Any thoughts at all? I mean, myself, I would hope they would be something that we could relate to, sort of like, as I always say, a Klingon or a Romulan, or just some humanoid with some common reference frame to humans. But what do you think? What would you really like to have land on the White House lawn? Okay, the other thing that I'd like to talk about is the fast walkers. These are things that come in and then out of our atmosphere at unimaginable speed. So again, that's in our atmosphere, and then boop, out they go again. Peter Davenport of New Fork for years has been trying to get funding for passive radar to follow them, and another radar specialist, or rather one who's looking into making computer sense out of radar returns, is a brilliant young man in England that you know on the comment pages as Freeman. And now, George Filer has brought to our attention NASA setting up, and this is really funny, NASA has named this the All Sky Fireball Network. And it's supposedly there to track meteorites. And, maybe, possibly, just maybe, spacecraft. But NASA isn't the only one. Our ancestors have been aware of these craft for millennia. They have told us of them in their reports, now called myths and ancient religions. They have drawn them on the walls of their caves, and they have handed down their experience with these unknown craft through word of mouth, down through the ages. We must assume that they thought it was important. Van Daniken and Sitchin, both serious professional investigators, deserve our thanks for bringing this to our attention. Our guest, Giorgio Tsoukalos, was incredibly passionate in describing their and his research into ancient astronauts. And I'm sure we've all seen them on TV, and you look at this stuff and you go, something went on. I don't know. And I think...
it's an email that came in.
Oh, we had an email that came in as well. Hold on. This is from Doug Schultz. He says, "Hi, Kate. I'm a believer. When I was 6 years old, my older brother, 2 neighbor boys, and I saw what I now know were 3 grays walking across an open field. When they got to the edge of the field, they appeared to walk through a fence and disappear into a wooded area. Years later, along with 2 others, he witnessed 2 boomerang-shaped UFOs. A few years later, while in the military, stationed in Germany, he saw a 3rd UFO. Years after that, while working as a police officer, I investigated 3 mutilated cattle. I was also stalked by a large orange oval-shaped UFO one night. I appeared on the last episode of UFO Hunters talking about this encounter, but it was edited to the point that the entire story was changed. There's no doubt in my mind they exist. I believe that there are many different alien races. I also believe crop circles are an attempt on their part to communicate with us." That's from Doug. Thank you, Doug. Thank you for sharing that with us. It's so typical, too, of so many people that come up with these stories that, it's sad in a way because people look at them and, you get the hairy eyeball roll, and it's not right. I mean, they've seen something, they've witnessed something. This man is obviously a very respectable, credible witness, and he should be listened to, and it should be investigated, and it annoys me that it's not. And let's see, from Dale wrote in to say, "I think it's pretty egotistical to think that we are the only ones in the universe." Also pretty stupid, too, I think, Dale. "Many religions around the world do not discount that we have been visited. They talk of the sky gods. Recently, the Catholic Church said if there were life on other planets, it doesn't change anything the Catholic Church teaches. It might be of note to you, too, Dale, that the Catholic Church has the largest astrobiology unit anywhere." So, let's see, Earl wrote in again to say he's skeptical that formal disclosure will ever happen, excepting in the aftermath of a public and transparent UFO sighting and landing. Well, that might happen in the Olympics in London. That would be something, wouldn't it, Earl? Can you imagine that? A gray comes out and goes, "Yes, we're going to..." The problem is classification. Those who do not have access to this information have no idea whether it exists or not. Good point. Those who do are sworn to secrecy, so it's a non-starter. What we do have is the testimony of long-retired servicemen, and again, like people like Doug that just wrote in. I mean, this is obviously testimony that should be taken seriously. And the wink-wink, nudge-nudge, off-the-record comments made to authors by government officials, and everyone in government has an agenda. New news has been more forthcoming from the government and the mainstream media, such as exoplanets, evidence of fossilized microorganism on Mars, etc. But the backfilling of what has been happening since circa 1947 is still a mystery. What is needed, in my opinion, is adequate private funding that could drive a coordinated and well-equipped data collection effort. Such an effort would be international in nature and must remain outside of government auspices, yeah, good luck with that one, so that it is not co-opted. And I have to agree with you. Oh, we've got some other things. Scott wrote in to say, as far as I'm concerned, disclosures happen. The government knows that they are there. Most of us believe. So what's next? And Timothy Dean said, curious question. Has there been any confirmation of what alien species can be related to the type of craft? That's a good thought. For example, grays to the classic saucer, reptilians to cigar-shaped, Nordics to the black triangles. I have never seen, read, or heard of any type of correlation like that. Neither have I, Timothy. That's a really good point. It would also sort of indicate the body shape of the beings that are piloting those craft. That's really a good thing, Timothy. I hadn't thought of that. But, I think disclosure is the big thing, and I think Earl's right. We do have to have some sort of somebody somewhere, like we all had sort of hopes that the Rockefellers would kick in a few million to do this. Certainly, and his name escapes me right now, I'm having a senior moment, the real estate mogul out in Las Vegas pushed in a ton of dough that really didn't seem to, with the National Institute of Discovery, that didn't seem to go anywhere. I think what happens is after a while the government does get wind of it and does shut it down. One of the other problems is, and as much as you might not like to think of a orthodox scientist in a sense, investigating UFOs, it is, because of the giggle factor, it is still a real career killer. And not only is it a career killer, but it's a killer of being able to get grants. If you can't get grants, you don't do research, and if you don't do research, you don't get anywhere in science. So you can see why the orthodox branch of the sciences is not really getting into this to some extent. But I'd be remiss if I didn't think that some young physicist somewhere is going to start to put two and two together and realize that the aeronautical capabilities of these craft indicate that there is something in physics that we have not yet discovered. Certainly Bob Schroeder was on last week, and he was talking about the bulk, which was an interesting theory. This is sort of the space between two dimensions, two universes, two areas of space-time fabric where these craft can come in and go out at will, not only in space but also in time, which brings up some really interesting speculations. But I would be remiss if I did not congratulate the scientists who, after decades and decades of research, finally came up with proof of the Higgs boson. I know a lot of you might not be familiar with that, but this is one of those scientific discoveries that will not have any effect on us right now, but in years to come, I think it will be responsible for a huge, huge jump in technology. Much as a lot of the technology that may or may not have been back engineered after the 1947 crash pushed us into the future. And there was another one of our speakers on this show sort of speculated. He was wondering if the crash, and I think it may have been Scott too, about the Aztec crash, Scott Ramsey, he was wondering if maybe these crashes were done on purpose, that they were trying to disclose some technology to we poor primitives, and one way to do it would be to land a craft, make that technology available to us, and sort of let us ponder it over, like the chimp in 2001, and then come up with the answers. Because it does seem as if, just like the Cambrian explosion back whenever, that there has been a technology explosion, and you have to wonder if there is not some intervention by, if not some higher power, there may be some race that might be interested in us. But when the end of this comes, and we do know all that there is to know about UFOs, and there is hopefully some sort of a landing and some sort of an ultimate disclosure, I think we're going to find out more about all of this than we even thought was available. I think it's the final result is going to be just an amazing, amazing surprise. And as Shakespeare said, there are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in our philosophy. And I don't know, when we find it out, maybe that's why the government is dripping and dribbling it out to us, because there's going to be not only technological change, but just tremendous sociological change. And if, as a lot of the speakers suggest, there is going to be all the secrets about free energy disclosed, that's going to be an enormous economic upheaval too. So all in all, I think there's a lot of questions here, and I think when their answers come out, we're going to be surprised, I hope pleasantly. But at any rate, that's about all that I have to say today, so I'm going to be signing off now. It's a little early, but I think this was a good note to leave you on. And really, if you have more comments, if after you think about it, you have some other questions, please post them on the comment page. I really like to see them. Anyway, it's been a very interesting hour. It's been great to hear from you and to hear what you had to say about this UFO thing. Thanks a lot. Thanks as always to both Dave and Bill, the ones who taught me how to do this show and who stand by. They are unbelievable moral support. Have a great weekend. Please don't forget to subscribe to our Still Free podcast to help us keep our numbers up. We'll see you next Friday at 1 when our guest will be Dr. Thomas Stryker. He is the author of Extraplanetary Experiences, a discussion of possible alien-human contact. So that's very apropos. So until next Friday, you know the drill. Keep your eye on the sky. Bye.
If you missed part of today's program or you'd like to hear it again, be sure to subscribe to the Kate Valentine UFO Show podcast. Go to Kate's website, AtlanticCoastUFOs.com, and sign up by entering your email address on the homepage. Every week, the show will be delivered right to you, so you'll never miss another intriguing, thought-provoking interview with the top names in the UFO field. Sign up today for the Kate Valentine UFO Show podcast at AtlanticCoastUFOs.com.